That's good. So, is the taxpayer who is taxed to give the money to somebody else, like for foreign aid or to this farmer, is he being protected by the government when the government does that?
Is the taxpayer being protected?
Yes, this taxpayer whose money is being taken from him in order to give to someone else, is he being protected? You remember in the beginning you said that the government should protect the citizens against peaceful citizens against people that want to use force to take their money, like these farmers. The farmers would like to, they organize politically, and then they persuade the government to pass a law to force all these taxpayers, like you said, to give them money for not farming. So, are they protecting the taxpayer when they do that? Is that will you call that protection when they force you they forcefully take your money and give it to someone else?
Well, see again, your definition of forcefully taken is a different definition than mine.
So
what I would say is this.
Okay, are taxes voluntary, or are you forced to pay?
Taxes. If you don't pay your taxes, there are legal consequences.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess if you there are legal consequences to not paying your taxes. So if that's being forced, then I guess I'm in agreement with you.
Well, the consequences are that you ultimately, if you don't do what they say, you have to pay a fine, and if you don't pay the fine, you go to jail.
But again, let's go back to my broader.
Right. So you were objecting
I don't know.
As to whether it was forceful or not. Everything that is required by law is forceful. I mean, that's why they call it law enforcement, right?
Again, I think you're crossing a line that you and I aren't on the same page on this line.
On what? What is it that we disagree on?
Again, to me, forceful taking is if someone comes up to me with a gun or a knife and threatens my life. That's a forceful taking.
So if you don't pay your taxes, what will happen?
I don't consider.
If you say you don't pay your taxes, what will happen?
I don't consider the tax system to be a forceful taking of my money.
Okay, so what happens if you decide not to pay these taxes?
Well, there are consequences.
Which consequences?
I haven't studied all the consequences. I'm sure there's fines, there's penalties.
What happens if you don't pay the fine?
I assume the government comes in and puts a lien on your property.
Will they ultimately, and they'll take your money, and if you try to prevent them, will they take it forcefully, the property, will they take it forcefully? If you say, don't do that, I don't want you to take my property,
well,
and will the police or the marshal say, hey, look, I got a gun here, so step aside, buddy, I'm going to take your stuff.
But again, to go where you're going, and this is why I don't agree with you, everybody has due process rights, correct? We have a court system.
Yeah.
So if the government comes and makes a claim that you either didn't pay your taxes, didn't pay the correct amount of taxes, you have what's known as due process.
If they follow the due process, it makes it right? So, in Nazi Germany,
yes.
they followed the process.
Nazi Germany.
Right. Well, just you'll see the consequence of that conclusion. In Nazi Germany, they followed the process very well. They said put the Jews in the boxcars and send them to the concentration camps. They followed the process, but it was immoral and wrong, and I'm sure you would have objected to it, right? Even though they followed the process.
I would strenuously object to that, yes.
So the fact that you follow the legal process doesn't make it right, correct?
Well, again, we're in the United States of America right now.
Uh-huh.
You either have faith in the legal system or you don't. I have faith in the legal system.
Oh, I thought you didn't. I thought that was the whole thing. You were talking about corruption. Anyway, so my question is, can you call that protecting a taxpayer when they take his money and give it to someone else against his will, because he doesn't want to give his money for farm subsidies, when they take it from him and give it to someone else, they're protecting him? Is that protection? So isn't he better off if they don't protect him?
Well,
because if forcefully taking your money to give it to someone else for this purpose or the other thing that has nothing to do with rendering a service to you, if that is protection, you're better off not being protected.
Well, again, you're asking some very broad-based questions here, but let's go to your farm subsidies. Somehow farm subsidies is troubling you today. In order to get the farm subsidies,
we can do foreign aid if you want.
Okay, well, we can go to foreign, but in order to get the farm subsidies, there has to be a debate in Congress.
Absolutely.
So it has to go through the committee process in the House, and then it has to be voted on by the full House.
Right.
Then it has to go to the Senate, be voted on by the full Senate.
Right.
Now, somewhere in that process, whether I agree with it or not, and maybe that's where you're going to, whether I agree with it or not, someone has made a case as to why having farm subsidies is a good thing. I don't know what their standard is.
Just
it's a
like
good thing.
Hitler, he made a case that killing all the Jews was a good thing.
I can't.
And he
I
persuaded,
can't quite.
he persuaded the Germans
I can't
that
quite
was a
equate-
good thing, and they sent him in the boxcars.
We can't go back to Nazi Germany here, but every time you do, that's when I will clearly agree with you that was the most heinous thing ever and horrible. I agree with
Right,
that.
right,
but
but-
let's just talk farm subsidies because it's not quite the same place. It's on farm subsidies.
I agree.
Farm
Not
subsidies.
It's much less just
We have
taking some money.
people have been elected to Congress, and I assume they've been legally elected. They represent their citizens, and they have debated this issue, and they have made a determination that we should have these farm subsidies. Now, as I told you before, I don't have a position on farm subsidies, but as long as they've worked their way through the system in the legitimate way, and the